Hello, here's part 3 of some interesting facts. Let's dive right into it. During World War II, a Great Dane named Juliana was awarded the Blue Cross Medal. She extinguished an Syrian bomb by peeing on it. Good job, Juliana. There were female gladiators in ancient Rome. A female gladiator was called gladiatrix, plural for gladiatrix. They are extremely rare, unlike their male counterparts. You may know them as a bunch of heroes that broke box office records from their movies, but the Avengers was also a group of Jewish assassins who hunted Nazi war criminals after World War II. They poisoned 2,283 German prisoners of war. From 1912 to 1948, the Olympic Games held competitions in the fine arts. Medals were given for literature, architecture, sculpture, painting, and music. Obviously, the art created was required to be Olympic themed. Cleopatra wasn't actually Egyptian. As far as historians can tell, Egypt's famous femme fatale was actually Greek. She was a descendant of Alexander the Great's general Flammarion. George Washington opened a whiskey distillery after his presidency. By 1799, Washington Distillery was the largest in the country, producing 11,000 gallons of unaged whiskey. During the Salem witch trials, the accused weren't actually burned at the stake. The majority were jailed and some were hanged, but none of the 2,000 people accused of being a witch were ever burned alive. President Zachary Taylor died from a cherry overdose. Zachary Taylor passed away after eating way too many cherries and drinking milk on 4th of July party in 1850. He died on July 9th from gastroenteritis. The acid in cherries, along with milk, is believed to have caused this. So, if you're ever doing a party of cherries, don't drink milk included. Andrew Jackson had a pet parrot, and he also taught his parrot to curse like a sailor. This is even one legend that the parrot had to be taken out of Jackson's funeral for its profanity. I would love my animals to do that when I'm dead. The Bloody Mary wasn't always called Bloody Mary. First, the popular brunch drink was actually called a bucket of blood. After bucket of blood was translated to red snapper, it finally settled to Bloody Mary. In the ancient Olympics, athletes performed naked. This was to achieve closeness to the gods and also help detox the skin through sweating. In fact, the word gymnastics comes from the ancient Greek word gymnasia, athletic training exercise, and also nude or naked. In 1386, a pig was executed in France in the Middle Ages. The pig attacked a child who went to die later from its wounds. The pig was arrested, kept in prison, and then sent to court where it stood trial for murder and found guilty, and then executed by hanging. I'd love to be a lawyer in that situation. During the Great Depression, people made clothing out of food sacks. People used flour bags, potato sacks, and anything made out of burlap. Because of this trend, food distributors started to make their sacks more colorful to help people remain a little bit more fashionable. I'd love to see Chanel or Gucci come out with a fashion line called Sack. The University of Oxford is older than the Aztec Empire. The University of Oxford first opened its doors to students all the way back in 1096. By comparison, the Aztec Empire is said to be an organization founded in the city of Lake Texcoco by Mexico in the year 1325. The most famous serial killer that was female was a Hungarian countess, Elizabeth Bathory de Escad. She was accused of torturing and killing over 650 young men, most of them between the ages of 10 and 14. Russians ran out of vodka celebrating the end of World War II. When the Long War ended, street parties engulfed the Soviet Union, lasting for days, until all the nation's vodka reserves ran out for a mere 22 hours after partying started. The first officials of Medal of Honor were awarded during the American Civil War. They were awarded to Union soldiers who participated in the Great Locomotive Chase of 1862. In 18th century England, pineapples were a status symbol. Those rich enough to own a pineapple were carry them around to signify their personal wealth and high-class status. In that day and age, everything from clothing to houseware was decorated with the tropical fruit. So if you have a pineapple on your purse, you are quite a Kardashian. In ancient Greece, they believed redheads became vampires after death. This was partly because redhead people were very pale skinned and sensitive to sunlight, unlike the Greeks, who had olive skin and dark features. Ferrets, dogs, and monkeys were the most popular pets in the Roman Empire instead of cats. Ancient Romans used ferrets to hunt mice and rats. They used dogs as guards and monkeys as entertainment. I know I talked about this in the previous interesting facts, but here's more detailed depth into ferrets. For over 30 years, Canada and Denmark have been fighting for control of a tiny island near Greenland called Hans Island. Once in a while, when officials from each country visit, they leave a bottle of their country's liquor as a power move. As St. Lawrence was roasted on a gridiron by the perfect Rome during the persecution of Christians, legend says he cheerfully declared, "I'm well done on the side, turn me over." Because of this, he derives his patronage of cooks, chefs, and comedians. I believe the gridiron was a torture device. It's basically a metal frame where it looks like a bed, and they're fried with fire underneath them. So I guess once they're done, they're flipped over, and the bed basically looks like a barbecue. Roman gladiators often became celebrities and even endorsed products. Children would even play with gladiator action figures made out of clay. Also, their sweat was an aphrodisiac. Johnny Appleseed, the legend, was actually a real person. In his hometown of Massachusetts, he also had a street named after him, though the city planners decided it would be more patriotic or poetic if his name became a mythical name as Johnny Appleseed. Cars weren't invented in the US. Actually, they were invented in the 19th century by European engineers. Their names were Carl Benz and Emily Levarzar, and they were working on automobile inventions. They patented the first automobile in 1886. Abe Lincoln was a licensed bartender. In 1833, the 16th president opened a bar called Berry and Lincoln with his friend William F. Berry in New Salem, Illinois. The shop was eventually closed when Berry, a raging alcoholic, consumed most of the shop's supply. Most mummies that were discovered was actually consumed in the 18th century or the 19th century due to believing that it was a spiritual goodness for them. From the 1940s to the 1970s, Yale, plus other Ivy League schools like Harvard, required their freshmen to pose nude for a photo shoot. The goal was to gather material for a massive study into how rickets developed, and that involved sticking pins to the back of the subjects, male and female. Generations of the country's elite who went to the Ivy Leagues posed, and the archives included the naked photos of well-known figures ranging from George W. Bush, Hillary Clinton, and Meryl Streep. The photos were destroyed after news leaked and the study was denounced. The Luftwaffe had a master interrogator, Hans Schroeffer, whose tactic was being as nice as possible. His best tactics of being information out of prisoners included nature walks without guards present, baking them homemade food, cracking jokes, drinking beers, and afternoon tea with German fighter Aches. His technique was so successful that the US military later incorporated the methods into their own interrogation schools. In ancient Asia, death by elephant was a popular form of execution, which I've said before. They would twist limbs, crush skulls, break limbs, slowly of course, and even execute people using large blades fitted to their tusks. It was even popular up to the late 19th century. Using forks used to be seen as scurrilous. The widely used eating utensil was once seen as blasphemy and offense to God. Of course, why was it a blasphemy to God? Because it was thought of to be artificial hands and considered a sin. Mary indeed had a little lamb. Her name was Mary Sawyer. She was an 11-year-old girl who lived in Boston. One day was followed to school by her pet lamb. In the late 1860s, she helped raise money for an old church by selling wool from the lamb. Back in the 16th century, the wealthy elite used to eat dead bodies. It was rumored it would cure diseases. What would they eat? Ancient Egyptian mummies. Winston Churchill typically smoked 8 to 10 cigars a day, sometimes as much as 15. During the American Prohibition, he would get a doctor's note saying he needed to drink indefinitely amounts of alcohol when he could come to visit the States. Smart man. 100 million years ago, in the Sahara Desert, it was inhabited by galloping crocodiles. Back then, Sahara Desert was a lush oasis full of life, and full of predators as well. In 2009, fossil hunters found the remains of a crocodile that had large land-going legs that were capable of galloping across the land at breakneck speeds. Back then, Sahara Desert was a jungle, such as the Scorpion King movie. Good job, Rock. You rock. When Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette was beheaded, it is said that people dipped handkerchiefs in their blood to keep as souvenirs. In 2011, a group of scientists confirmed that a blood-stained handkerchief dated approximately 1793 was soaked in the blood of Louis XVI. That is quite tasty tomato sauce. In 1644, English statesman Oliver Cromwell banned the eating of pie. He declared it a pagan for pleasure. For 16 years, pie eating and making went underground until the Restoration leaders lifted the ban on pie in 1660. I guess that's where the term pie eating contest came along. John Adams and Thomas Jefferson, founding fathers and the second and third presidents, died on the same day, within hours of each other, on July 4th. Joan of Arc convinced Charles VII she could lead her armies with no experience. She routed the English and survived a 6-foot escape leap from a tower uninjured. With falsely accused of heresy and burned at the stake, her heart survived, astonishingly. The sound made by the Krakatoa volcano eruption in 1883 was so loud, it ruptured the eardrums of people 40 miles away. Traveled around the world 4 times, and it was clearly heard 3,000 miles away. The South African Railway was once operated with a baboon. The Tale of Two Lovers, an erotic novel, was made by Pope Plus II before he was in power. It is believed that roughly 97% of history has been lost. Written accounts of history only started 60,000 years, but only modern humans were around over 200,000 years, according to archaeologists. Before Julius Caesar invaded Britain, Romans didn't believe Britain even existed. The Soviet Union tried to snuff out the memory of Genghis Khan. During the Soviet era, rule of the late 20th century, mentioning great Mongolian conqueror's name was a crime against the USSR. The Soviets removed his story from school textbooks and outlawed pilgrimage to his birthplace in Asia. The guillotine was created for equality reasons. Until its widespread use, the regular methods of execution in France were rather savage. Punishment like being drawn and quartered was common, such as beaten and drawn out by horses. The idea to use the guillotine as a main method of execution was part of the movement for equality in France that spurred a revolution. The guillotine was also, in the main parts when it was first began use, was very savage. It would take a couple hits before the head was knocked off. So just imagine you laying there and the guillotine didn't go all the way through your head, so it took a couple tries. It was according to what the person did, if the person was face forward against the blade or neck down. So if the face was facing forward, it would take more tries to get to the spinal cord, which is quite brutal and fun. Adolf Hitler helped design the Volkswagen Beetle. Ancient Egyptians used a slab of rock as pillows. First known artwork was dated back roughly 100,000 years ago. During World War II, Americans called hamburgers Liberty Steaks because they felt hamburgers were too German. The Dutch Sicily War lasted 335 years and had no battles or deaths. Adolf Hitler's nephew fought against Nazis. The fastest surgeon ever ended up causing a 300% mortality rate. The fastest knife in the West was his name. He was a pioneer in speed surgery. When performing a battlefield amputation in a group of spectators, he was so fast that he accidentally cut his assistant's fingers off. There are dance marathons during the Great Depression. These human endurance contests served as a way of giving financially unstable marriage couples a roof over their head and a food to eat for a few days. The dance partners would take turns sleeping while the other propped them up and continued dancing with them. 1 in 200 men are direct descendants of Genghis Khan. The Mongolian emperor was known for having at least 11 children. Conducted a study in 2003 that showed that 1 in 200 men shared a Y chromosome from the conqueror. In the Victorian era, men with mustaches used special cups called mustache cups. Very creative. It would help guard them, which prevented the man's mustache to be dipping in the liquid itself. Well, that's all I have for today for interesting facts. I'll have different subject matters in the future of history. Thank you for having me, and thank you for my editor doing an amazing job as well. And have a great day. Bye.